What if I told you that 5 invisible forces are quietly draining your bank account right now, and most people don't even realize it's happening until it's too late? These aren't dramatic market crashes or get-rich-quick schemes gone wrong. These are subtle, everyday decisions that seem harmless on the surface, but compound into financial disasters over decades. My name is Nick, and I've spent years studying why some people build wealth effortlessly while others work just as hard, but somehow never get ahead. The difference isn't luck, intelligence, or even income level. It's avoiding these 5 wealth killers that I'm about to reveal. If you can master this, you'll be ahead of 90% of people when it comes to building long-term financial security. Here's what's fascinating about these wealth destroyers. They're socially acceptable, even encouraged by our culture. Your friends will congratulate you for some of these decisions. Your family might be proud of you for others. But behind the scenes, they're systematically destroying your ability to build real wealth. By the end of this breakdown, you'll see exactly why the average person struggles financially, and more importantly, how to avoid their mistakes. Let's start with the most dangerous wealth killer of all, and it's probably sitting in your wallet right now. High interest debt is like having a financial parasite that grows stronger every month you ignore it. We're talking about credit cards, personal loans, and any debt charging you more than 10% annually. This stuff doesn't just cost you money, it costs you opportunities, freedom, and peace of mind. Here's the brutal math that credit card companies hope you never figure out. The average credit card interest rate has climbed to over 22% as of this year. If you're carrying a $10,000 balance, you're paying roughly $2,200 annually just in interest payments. That's money vanishing into thin air without reducing your balance by a single penny. But it gets worse, much worse. Let's say you decide to pay the minimum payment on that $10,000 balance. At typical minimum payment rates, you'll be making payments for over 30 years and end up paying more than $32,000 total. You literally bought the same stuff 3 times over. Meanwhile, if you had invested that money in a simple index fund averaging 8% returns, that same amount would have grown to over $100,000 in 30 years. The opportunity cost is staggering, but there's something even more sinister about high interest debt. It traps you in what I call the financial hamster wheel. You're running as fast as you can, making payments every month, but you're not actually getting anywhere. This limits your ability to take risks, change careers, or invest in opportunities that could dramatically improve your financial situation. Think about it this way. If you're sending hundreds or thousands of dollars every month to credit card companies, you can't afford to take that entrepreneurial leap or invest in that real estate opportunity. You're stuck in whatever job pays enough to service your debt, even if that job is slowly killing your soul or limiting your earning potential. The second wealth killer is something that's happening to your money right now, whether you're paying attention or not. Inflation is the silent thief that makes everything more expensive while making your savings worth less. Most people treat inflation like weather, something that just happens to them. But wealthy people understand that ignoring inflation is like ignoring a leak in your roof. It starts small, but over time, it destroys everything. Consider this reality check. 4 years ago, a decent lunch might have cost you $8. Today, that same meal is probably $12 or $13. Your weekly grocery bill that used to be $80 is now closer to $120. These aren't just temporary price increases. This is your money losing purchasing power, and it's accelerating. The Federal Reserve targets about 2% inflation annually, which sounds manageable until you do the math. At 2% inflation, your money loses half its purchasing power every 35 years. At 4% inflation, which we've seen recently, your money is worth half as much in just 18 years. If you're keeping significant amounts of money in checking accounts earning 0 interest or even savings accounts earning 1%, you're guaranteed to get poor every single year. But here's where it gets really insidious. Inflation doesn't hit everything equally. It's like the things you actually need, like food, housing, healthcare, and energy, often inflate faster than the official numbers suggest. Meanwhile, the things that get cheaper, like electronics and clothing, represent a smaller portion of your budget. So the real inflation you experience is probably higher than what gets reported in the news. The wealthy understand this, which is why they don't keep large amounts of cash sitting around. They put their money into assets that can grow faster than inflation. Real estate, stocks, commodities, even certain businesses can serve as inflation hedges, but the average person keeps their emergency fund in a savings account, earning practically nothing, watching their purchasing power evaporate year after year. This brings us to the third wealth killer, and it's probably the most frustrating one because it's completely self-inflicted. Staying on the sidelines when it comes to investing is like watching a train leave the station while you're standing on the platform with a valid ticket. You have everything you need to build wealth, but fear, procrastination, or misguided caution keeps you from taking action. The stock market has averaged around 10% annual returns over the past century, including the Great Depression, multiple recessions, world wars, and every crisis you can imagine. Despite all the volatility and scary headlines, patient investors who stayed the course built tremendous wealth. But the average person finds every excuse to avoid participating in this wealth building machine. They say the market is too high when it's near all-time highs, forgetting that the market spends most of its time near all-time highs because it generally trends upward over time. When the market drops, they say it's too risky and wait for things to stabilize. When it's stable, they say it's boring and wait for a better opportunity. This cycle of excuses can last decades, and during that time, they miss out on compound growth that could have made them wealthy. Here's a sobering example from Fidelity's research. If you invested $10,000 in the S&P 500 from 1980 to 2022 and stayed invested every single day, your money would have grown to over $1 million. But if you missed just the 5 best days during that 42-year period, your gains would have been 38% lower. Missing the 10 best days cuts your returns by 55%. The problem is that those best days often come right after the worst days. They happen when fear is highest and when staying invested feels most uncomfortable. The investors who panic and sell during downturns miss the recovery that follows. They end up buying high and selling low, which is the exact opposite of what creates wealth. But there's an even more common version of staying on the sidelines, and it's keeping large amounts of money in cash because it feels safe. With inflation running at 3 to 4% and savings accounts paying maybe 1%, you're guaranteed to lose purchasing power every year. That's not safety. That's a slow motion financial disaster. The fourth wealth killer is perhaps the most socially acceptable form of financial self-destruction, and it's called lifestyle inflation. This is when your spending automatically increases to match your income, ensuring that you never actually get ahead no matter how much money you make. It's the reason why people making 6 figures often live paycheck to paycheck, just like people making $30,000 a year. Here's how it typically works. You get a raise or a better job, and suddenly you deserve a nicer apartment or a bigger house. You upgrade your car because the old one doesn't match your new status. You start eating at more expensive restaurants and shopping at higher-end stores. Each individual decision seems reasonable, but collectively they consume every extra dollar you earn. The insidious part about lifestyle inflation is that it feels like progress. You're living better, driving nicer cars, wearing better clothes, and living in better neighborhoods. Your friends and family see these upgrades as signs of success. But financially, you're running in place or even going backward because your expenses are growing faster than your wealth. This is why you'll meet people who earn impressive salaries but have almost nothing saved. They've upgraded their lifestyle to match their income, but they haven't upgraded their wealth building habits. They look successful on the outside while being financially fragile on the inside. One job loss or unexpected expense could derail their entire financial situation. The wealthy think differently about lifestyle upgrades. They increase their standard of living slowly and deliberately, always ensuring that their wealth building comes first. When they get a raise, the first thing they do is increase their savings and investment contributions. Then, and only then, do they consider lifestyle improvements. The wealthy approach lifestyle inflation like a chess player thinks 3 moves ahead. They ask themselves, if I upgrade my living situation now, what does that mean for my investment contributions? If I lease that luxury car, how many years will that delay my financial independence? These questions might seem excessive, but they're the difference between looking wealthy and actually being wealthy. Think about the psychological trap here. When you upgrade your lifestyle, you don't just increase your expenses for that month or year, you reset your baseline expectations for what normal looks like. That expensive apartment becomes your new minimum standard. That luxury car payment becomes a fixed part of your budget. You've essentially given yourself a pay cut disguised as an upgrade. Here's where it gets really dangerous. Like, lifestyle inflation creates what economists call the hedonic treadmill. You get temporary satisfaction from the upgrade, but then you adapt to your new normal. The fancy apartment stops feeling special. The expensive car becomes just your car. But the payments remain, and now you need even bigger upgrades to get that same feeling of progress. Meanwhile, compound interest is working against you instead of for you. Every dollar you spend on lifestyle inflation is a dollar that can't compound over decades. If you upgrade your housing costs by $500 per month, that's not just $6,000 per year. Invested over 30 years, that money could have grown to over $600,000. You literally traded potential financial independence for a slightly nicer living situation. Now, let's talk about the 5th wealth killer, and this one might sting a little because it's sitting in your driveway right now. Cars are depreciating assets disguised as necessities, and the way most people buy them is financial suicide. We've been conditioned to see cars as extensions of our personality, symbols of success, and rewards for hard work. But from a wealth building perspective, they're money pits on wheels. The average new car loses 10 to 20% of its value the moment you drive it off the lot. Not when you get home, not after the first week, but literally as soon as the wheels hit the street. By the end of the first year, that car has lost about 20 to 30% of its original value. After 5 years, it's worth maybe half of what you paid for it. You bought an asset that's guaranteed to lose money faster than almost any investment you could make. But the depreciation is just the beginning of this financial nightmare. The average car payment in America is now over $700 per month, and that's before insurance, maintenance, gas, and registration fees. When you add everything up, the American Automobile Association estimates that owning a new car costs over $12,000 annually. That's more than many people save for retirement in an entire year. Here's the math that car dealers hope you never calculate. If instead of making a $700 car payment, you invested that money in index funds averaging 8% returns, you'd have over $800,000 after 30 years. But most people will go through multiple cars during that time, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on depreciating assets while building zero wealth from those purchases. The financing makes it even worse. Car loans typically run 5 to 7 years now, and many people are trading in their cars before the loans are paid off. This creates negative equity where you owe more than the car is worth. Dealers love this because they roll that negative equity into your new loan, creating an even bigger monthly payment. You end up financing cars you no longer own while buying new cars you can't actually afford. There's also a psychological component that makes cars particularly dangerous for wealth building. We spend significant time in our vehicles, and there's a natural tendency to want that time to be pleasant. Heated seats, premium sound systems, advanced technology, and luxury interiors all seem like reasonable upgrades when you're financing them over 5 years. But you're paying interest on features that add no real value to your life and certainly don't help build wealth. The solution isn't to never buy a car, but to think about transportation differently than most people do. Buy reliable used cars that are 3 to 5 years old when most of the depreciation has already occurred. Pay cash if possible, or finance for the shortest term you can manage. Think of your car as a tool that gets you from point A to point B, not as a status symbol or reflection of your success. Consider this perspective shift. Every month you're not making a car payment is a month you can invest that money instead. Every year you keep a reliable used car instead of upgrading is another year of compound growth for your investments. The person driving the 10-year-old Honda Civic who's maxing out their retirement accounts is building more wealth than the person driving the brand new BMW with a $600 monthly payment. But here's what makes cars especially insidious as a wealth killer. The decision feels rational in the moment. You need reliable transportation to get to work. You want safety features to protect your family. You deserve something nice after working hard. All of these justifications seem reasonable, but they're often covering up the real motivation, which is wanting to project success to others. The irony is that the people who are actually building serious wealth often drive modest cars. Warren Buffett famously drove the same car for decades. Many millionaires drive vehicles that are several years old and completely paid off. They understand that cars are tools, not investments, and they allocate their money accordingly. This doesn't mean you have to drive a beater that breaks down every month. Reliable used cars from reputable manufacturers can last hundreds of thousands of miles with proper maintenance. The key is finding that sweet spot where you have dependable transportation without the wealth-killing effects of constant car payments and rapid depreciation. These 5 wealth killers work together in devastating ways. High-interest debt prevents you from investing. Ignoring inflation erodes your purchasing power. Staying on the sidelines means missing compound growth. Lifestyle inflation consumes your income, increases, and cars drain money that could be building wealth. Most people fall victim to multiple wealth killers simultaneously, which explains why building wealth feels impossible despite earning decent incomes. But here's the encouraging part. Once you recognize these patterns, you can start making different choices. You can prioritize paying off high-interest debt aggressively. You can invest consistently in assets that outpace inflation. You can resist lifestyle inflation and direct income increases toward wealth building. You can buy reliable used cars instead of financing depreciating assets. The beautiful thing about understanding these wealth killers is that the solution becomes crystal clear. You don't need some complex financial strategy or secret investment knowledge that only the wealthy possess. You just need to do the opposite of what most people do. And that's surprisingly simple once you see the patterns. Let me share something that might change how you think about money forever. Every financial decision you make falls into one of 2 categories. It either moves you closer to financial independence or further away from it. There's no neutral ground. That morning coffee subscription, that streaming service you forgot about, that impulse purchase on Amazon, they're all votes for the life you want to live. Most people think wealth building is about making more money, but that's only half the equation. The other half is about not destroying the money you already have. And this is where these wealth killers become so dangerous because they're socially acceptable ways to sabotage your financial future while feeling good about it. Here's what's really wild about this whole thing. If you can avoid just these 5 wealth killers, you'll automatically be ahead of probably 80% of people in terms of building long-term wealth. Not because you're doing anything particularly clever or sophisticated, but because you're not doing the dumb things that everyone else is doing. Think about your friends and family for a moment. How many of them are carrying credit card balances while complaining they can't afford to invest? How many are keeping their emergency funds in checking accounts while inflation eats away at their purchasing power? How many upgrade their cars every few years and wonder why they never seem to get ahead financially? The wealthy don't have some secret playbook that the rest of us don't have access to. They just consistently avoid these wealth-destroying behaviors while everyone else falls into the same predictable traps over and over again. It's like watching people step on the same rake repeatedly while wondering why their face keeps getting smacked. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is something that most financial advice completely misses. Avoiding these wealth killers isn't just about the money, it's about buying back your freedom. When you're not sending hundreds of dollars every month to credit card companies, you can afford to be pickier about your job. When you're not trapped in expensive car payments, you can take entrepreneurial risks. When you're building wealth instead of destroying it, you have options that other people simply don't have. This is why I get frustrated when people say they don't care about money or that money isn't important to them. Money might not be the most important thing in life, but it affects every single decision you make. Where you live, what you eat, how you spend your time, whether you can help family members in need, whether you can pursue your passions or interests. Money is freedom, and these wealth killers are stealing that freedom one monthly payment at a time.